COVID-19 has undoubtedly driven an increase in assessing and understanding risks posed to businesses. As the climate continues to change, environmental factors will become a more pressing risk for businesses. There's compelling evidence that climate change will lead to increases in heavy rainfall and significantly increased risks of flooding. Rising sea levels will also lead to further increase the risk of flooding and erosion along coastlines. Flooding experienced last summer highlighted the devastating consequences that flooding can have, with huge loss of life and destruction overseas, particularly in Germany, China and Belgium. The UK also experienced flash flooding on a lesser scale, but still with horrific impacts on home and business owners. It's a stark warning of what could be to come. When businesses are looking to mitigate risk, flood risk must be high on the agenda. 40% of businesses do not reopen after suffering a catastrophic loss due to flooding. Some businesses may never recover simply because they do not have suitable contingency plans in place. The impacts of flooding on a business can be both primary and secondary. Primary consequences could include the business premises being flooded, leaving it out of action for weeks or months, especially if machinery is damaged. Even where a business premises is shown to be at very low risk of flooding, it doesn't necessarily mean they're in the clear. A business may be impacted through secondary impacts. This could include supply chain partners being affected by flooding, a staff member's home being flooded, or even travel disruption due to extreme weather. Flooding can impact every one of us. Until very recently, environmental due diligence and conveyancing checks during a property purchase would be mainly focused on contamination issues. Today, although these risks are still taken seriously, the potential threat from flooding has become far more prominent. Furthermore, contamination is often able to be managed, but flooding is an impending threat which could happen at any time and at varying degrees of severity. Being fully informed of the potential risk from flooding is now vital. To be as best prepared as possible, businesses should research the flood risk prior to signing a lease or purchasing a site. Existing sites should also check their flood risk and take stock of not just their current operating procedures, but also their current premises. Many businesses do not have basic property information to hand, such as a drainage plan. Without knowing where the drains run, a blockage could remain unidentified or unresolved for a lengthy period of time, potentially causing unnecessary flooding. Once a business has conducted a flood risk assessment, the data should be stored within a BIM system, building information modelling, or at least in the cloud, such that it can be easily accessed and updated. If a flood risk is identified, the business should be better prepared, such as a minimum, implement a flood action plan, identifying an evacuation route, and how the business would respond. Usually, the process of conducting this is very useful to a business. Flood insurance is notoriously difficult for businesses to obtain, and therefore, to mitigate risk, businesses may also wish to implement both flood resistance and resilience measures. There are various different measures which can reduce the flood risk to your workplace with different levels of protection offered. The main difference between flood resistance and resilience is that resistance aims to prevent water entering a building with equipment such as flood barriers, whereas resilience aims to reduce the damage that is done when water has to enter a building and helps speed up the recovery process. Resilience measures could include aspects such as water-resistant flooring and raising electric sockets. In a business environment, this consideration can even be extended to aspects such as where computer towers are stored. I've visited numerous recently flooded businesses where the computer towers were on the floor and irreparably damaged by floodwater. 5 top tips for businesses are: number 1, check your flood risk. There are many different types of flooding, so it's important to know your level of risk. 2, be alert. Sign up for the free Environment Agency flood warning service. 3, draw up a plan of how you'll respond to a flood to keep you and your staff safe. Carefully think through how you will deal with any hazardous equipment and how to reduce the risk from polluting materials. 4, create a grab bag containing essential items such as hand gel, spare keys, water, etc. And make sure this bag is easily accessible and identify in your flood plan where it should be kept. 5, flooding could destroy your computers, so ensure you regularly back up your documents and data to a safe and secure storage place, such as the cloud. We know that flooding causes huge disruption and damage. However, by being prepared, the risk can be vastly reduced and disruption managed. Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire is a great example which floods regularly. Many businesses along the high street have taken action to be better prepared, with some able to mop up and reopen the very next day, as opposed to being closed for months. This has been achieved through careful risk reduction using property flood resilience measures such as flood barriers and water pumps, whilst also utilising resilient internal fixtures and fittings such as waterproof flooring. The bigger picture. Whilst companies can look to mitigate their own risk to premises and supply chains, they can also take actions to assist on a much wider scale. This may include aspects such as improving energy efficiency, using public transport where possible for business travel, implementing rainwater halving systems at their offices to assist with reducing water scarcity and reducing flood risk by limiting the water that enters a sewer network, installing solar panels or renewable technologies. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted how businesses need to be prepared for all kinds of risks. Whilst the pandemic is still rightly at the forefront of business planning, assessing the risks from future disruption from flooding cannot be ignored. With the changing climate, flood risk is due to increase.